What's up, everybody? It's your boy Nye, and today I am bringing you a consensus series. I've teamed up with Matthew Aaron from Crypto 101 podcast, and we held multiple interviews at Consensus together, interviewing some of the guests and talking a little bit about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and some other cool topics. I hope you guys enjoy. Shout out to our first sponsors, Casper Labs. Casper Labs is building a fully decentralized blockchain infrastructure that really focuses on high performance without compromising on decentralization or resorting to off-chain settlements. CBC Casper is a proof of stake consensus that provides faster, safer, and more energy efficient decentralized network consensus. As we've seen, one of the major issues with blockchain technology is most blockchains on the market today are not scalable. Without scalability, we face huge issues in terms of onboarding the next billion users into cryptocurrency. CBC Casper aims at solving this issue. If you want to learn more about Casper, head over to casperlabs.io. What is going on, everybody? It is your boy Nye. I'm here with the man Matthew from Crypto 101. This is the series of Consensus where we sit down, chat with people who are at Consensus, and teamed up with Evolvement and Crypto 101. It's going to be a good time. And we got my man Data Dash, aka Nicholas. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing, Michael?
Good, brother. Good. Why don't we just start off for people who don't know you or don't know what you do? Who are you? How did you get involved in crypto? And what do you do in the crypto space?
So I do a YouTube channel in the cryptocurrency space called Data Dash. We have an audience around 314,000 subscribers. Talk about, some of the market price action we see in cryptocurrencies, as well as some of the fundamental developments and some of the new emerging technologies in the space. Trying to kind of summarize why this is really all valuable in about 15 to 20-minute videos. My background for me personally, I did about 7 years of personal trading in traditional equities, so U.S. stocks, did commodities, trading bonds and all kinds of different things that I could get my hands on. And I've done a little bit of Forex trading, so currency markets as well. But cryptocurrencies is really where I've kind of found my fascination. Back in 2011, actually just recently at Consensus, got to meet Ron Paul finally.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
cool.
man.
Nice, man.
It was incredible. I was like first in line. I had to meet him. But for those who know Ron Paul, you'll probably know like about his kind of push on the banking system and resolving some of these problems that have been historically continuous. Central banks mismanaging monetary policy, and that's really what kind of drove me to get into crypto because I saw that we'd keep making the same mistakes if we didn't actually get to the core problem of it, of building a better system. So crypto was the first actual piece of technology that, looked towards building better money. And I've gotten just completely sucked into the space.
Man, 350,000 subscribers on YouTube is huge, bro.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that. How'd you get to that point? I mean, what do you think it is about you? What do you think it is about your channel that got you to that point? And do you think that, I guess Data Dash is a brand that is now synonymous with you and that channel now? Mm-hmm. Was that always the plan to become such a, I would say, respected and sought after source of information with that brand behind it? Because I personally, looking at it just first look, I go, doesn't quite match. No,
crypto, right?
Right. Exactly.
There's an interesting story, so I'll explain some of the growth factors and why I think they kind of helped the channel. But it was funny. I walked into this unintentional. So there's a lot of people at the time who saw crypto as this huge topic, and they thought, I could be the big voice for speaking on crypto. Right. And I think that's great. We need as many voices as possible. But I would have never thought that people want to hear me talk about crypto. In fact, my story is kind of an attestament to that. So at the time, I was pursuing a career in data analytics, and I was doing a tutorial on SQL or SQL, which is a language for managing data. And I was doing a thing on data analytics as well. So if you want, you can actually go back on the channel and you can find that series to look at it and stuff and watch it if you want to learn about those topics. But I was like, you know what? I was making it for employers. I thought no one was going to watch it. But I had to prove to employers that I knew how to actually break down data in a comprehensive way. So I was like, why not talk about the thing that I've been passionate about, crypto? Again, never thought people would watch it. After the second video, though, we got like 100 views. And I was like, okay, I had no subscribers at the time. I've got to keep this up. So I did 2 videos every day throughout the rest of 2017 from the beginning of the channel in July of 2017. And it grew to be the largest channel and stuff. I, again, never would have thought people want to hear me talk about it.
So are you monetized now with the 350? I mean, you throw the ads in there and stuff like that to get that ad revenue?
Yeah, so we do ads and stuff like that. And like for the first year, we just ran off Google Ag revenue and Patreon revenue. And during the bull market, you could do that. And nowadays, it's much more difficult because Google doesn't give you that good of rates. Not to mention as well, they cut out 60% 50% of the revenue, and Patreon's been down a little bit just with the bear market, but
Right.
it's been good. I'm able to sustain it because it's really just myself and doing on the content side of things. So we don't have a big production team. I do all the research, all the filming. But to your question as well about the growth, a lot of people ask me that, and they ask, have you done anything that's unorganic? And no, we're completely organic in the sense of our growth. The thing is that, again, I didn't intentionally do any of this, but I realized later on that we were doing a lot of the things that benefit from the YouTube algorithm. So I was covering a trending topic at the time, obviously, as most of us were in the media. So we got fortunate in that sense. But the other two things that I was doing different, or at least was doing right, was I had good watch time on my content. I, again, would have never thought people would listen to it, but we got like 15 minutes on average being watched out of the average 20-minute video that I'd make.
Oh, wow, that's big.
Yeah, like 75% retention rate. Anyone on YouTube will know, like, I mean, that's really big. And I was so thankful. I was like, I had no idea people would listen to that. And then the other thing as well was that I was doing residual content. So I was putting out at least 2 videos every single day. Weekdays.
Dude, that's a lot of work,
weekends.
man.
It was a lot. And at the time, I picked up a job at a startup in Silicon Valley. Doing both of those, I finally felt what burnout was like. I never knew. I was like, dude, what are these people talking about? Like, just go at it. Put the extra effort in. I was on like 2 cups of coffee, like 2 or 3 cups of tea every day. Doing my 9 to 5 at the startup, rushing upstairs at the in-house startup I was working at, and just doing 2 videos on crypto. And by 1 or 2 a.m., I was done by the day, and I had no free time. And I just went straight to bed, woke up at 7 the next morning, 5 hours of sleep.
Wow, man.
Yeah, so it's
crazy.
Hectic story, but I'm blessed to be here, man. It's been an amazing ride. I've gotten to travel a lot, and I would not have had any other channel be as successful as this one. I'm glad Data Dash was the one.
What are you feeling about Consensus this year? You like it so far? I mean, it's over today, but how was it for you?
It's interesting. I can't compare it to last year. I know from what I heard, there was a lot of hype and a lot of Lambos and all that kind of stuff from last year. And it seems like the tone, from going on to other crypto conferences, that it's gotten much more serious. I was glad to see the highlight around DeFi or decentralized finance, all around the lending platforms and the stablecoins kind of coming in. Because to me, this is really where the interesting application is. There's a lot of use cases for blockchain, but finance and money more specifically is really where I find my interest in the space. So being able to lend out credit to markets that originally are unbanked or don't have access to credit, that's where blockchain can really step in because it's permissionless, open source, open to anyone. And I think that was really good to see that was the highlight because I didn't know a lot of people were that focused on it.
So I was talking to my Facebook group and I was telling them why I'm here and what I'm trying to get out of Consensus. And I think everybody pretty knows what Michael does here. He shows his face. I'm here to meet people, have good interviews, and, just basically put a face to a voice because I don't have a face. Like I'm not on YouTube. I have a voice. Why are you here? When you came to this, you spent the money. You were here for the week. You were running around. What was your goal when you were here to meet people? I mean, because you don't interview. You just do your data. You do your data. You have a successful channel. What was your takeaway from this?
Well, we did do a few interviews on the podcast that we do on the channel, but outside of that, you're right. It's mostly daily updates. We didn't come here so much for so much business reasons. It was more of the fact that I wanted to meet the projects that were working in the DeFi movement. So outside of the YouTube channel, I'm working on a project called Project Genesis, and I don't want to scare people with a project that's usually correlated that there's a coin or token. There's no ICO, no fundraising. What we're actually trying to do right now is take all these great projects, the lending platforms, the stable coins, and the actual protocols like Ethereum and the big alliances that are on top of these protocols and saying, look, guys, you all have some great technologies, but you're all kind of working in a siloed fashion. Like everyone's trying to compete against one another. Let's try to come together for once in this open source community. So it's actually better to just work together in open source communities. Just bring everyone together and build a standard that removes as much friction as possible to allow people to borrow and lend and to access these other financial services that DeFi is offering. So we want to build out the back end with what we're doing with Project Genesis. And I'm doing a startup on the side as well that's aiming to be the front end, what will be how people will interact with this technology to make it as simple as possible. And if we can do that, I think it not only adds value to all the partners who could help build this up, who could be a part of Project Genesis, but it will actually help us materialize the 99.9% of people who right now are not going to take out a cryptocurrency loan. They can do it right now, but there's no framework to do it. There's no easy track for me to click a few buttons and be able to get access to capital that's based off of cryptocurrency networks. So that's what I was here to network with as many projects as I could who I felt would be good valid candidates for that.
And how are you feeling about everything right now in terms of the space? We've seen price movements, and we are recording this for everyone that knows. What day is it today?
Oh man, it's less
Today's
than
the 15th.
May
Yeah.
15th. So we might release this in a week or two.
I think
So-
it's telling that we don't know the date.
Yeah,
I'm the
exactly.
same ballpark, man. It's like it's wild.
It's been a long week,
Exactly.
It
guys.
has.
Exactly.
Oh,
so
man.
how are you feeling about the markets now, though? You know, what it's like 8,200, I think, at the time of this recording, and we've seen some,
I mean, up $2,000 in the past week?
Yeah.
almost 2x in 2 months, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah,
something
so
around
yeah,
there.
we've more than 2x off the lows and stuff. It's incredible. The major point I would say is that this is very similar to me to what we saw in, I think it's 2015, if I'm correct on my price data. There was a parabolic rise in Bitcoin before we really entered into the validating uptrend to previous highs, where Bitcoin topped out at 1,100 during 2013. So you saw this parabolic rise, and you saw a very sharp, like I think it's like 40 or 50% correction downward, and then it continued the uptrend. So what I think we're going to try to do.
So you think we're going to get a sharp down?
Yeah, because I mean,
Get back to around 5, 6?
yeah, I think we're gonna go around 5-6. That's the exact ballpark where I'm looking at, because I think there is some justification for why Bitcoin's moving up. Some people have mentioned macro things. There is fear when you have things like a trade war, for example. You do have people moving money out of currencies and traditional nationalities that are tied to that geopolitical issue, and then also the equity markets as well. And you really only need a blip of capital, small amount, to leave these markets skyrocketing,
Right?
Because Bitcoin's so it's liquid, much more liquid than it used to be, but it's still a very illiquid market. It's still
Right.
very early on. So that's one thing. But there's also been all the tether movement as well. A lot of the rumors going around.
Right.
No matter what it is, this market's going to start moving much faster, I think, than most people think, and it's going to be a nice, substantial uptrend for the long term, going up towards a much higher range than what we saw back in December of 2007.
So what do you think the uptrend is? I've been hearing a lot of people talk about it being the trade tariffs and China going OTC, buying a lot of Bitcoin because of some kind of. Anyway, what do you think it was?
I think it has much more to do with the underlying rumors that have been going around about like Tether moving around and stuff like that, and with Binance as well. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things. I haven't done enough research on it to really talk on it. I've been in just as much of a mystery as most people to it. But I think as well, honestly, as I thought about it more and more, stuff like a trade war would actually, when I saw the NASDAQ dropping 3% the other day, when fears like that come into equity markets, it's like, okay, this actually makes a little bit of sense that it might be, propping up crypto a tad bit. And also the Bitfinex premium went away like overnight. The $400 premium that was existing for months just evaporated. So
Right.
I think it shows that it's real entry of liquidity into this space, and people are feeling. So you might have a mixture as well of people FOMOing and think
That's
like,
true.
oh, this is the bull run, So
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I want to highlight is when we did our first interview, one of the things that still stuck with me is we were speaking about the level of adoption and the percentage of adoption worldwide, and how it hasn't reached anything even close to the tech bubble era.
Oh, yeah, during the
the
dot-com
dot-com
era,
bubble
yeah.
era. Exactly. Do you think that we're going to reach it in the next cycle, or do you think we have a few more cycles before we get to that 3 to 5% range? What's your opinion there?
if DeFi takes off as it can, if we don't get caught up in the same ego and the short-term kind of money gains we did during the last cycle, if we really put our heads down and build out some awesome applications, and like what we're hoping to do, I don't mean to just push what I'm trying to do because my view is one of many. If we can make it frictionless and easy for people to access capital through cryptocurrency networks, and we can scale those networks a little bit more than where we are now, you can get your 3 to 5% by 2022, which would be, I think, the peak of the next cycle. But it's going to be a challenge.
What is this, for people that don't know, what is this DeFi that you're talking about? You've mentioned it a couple of times now. What is that? Why is that important? Why are you so bullish on it?
It's funny. I didn't know what the term really meant for a long time, and I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is what I've been interested in for the past year, like in the past really last few months and stuff. So DeFi stands for decentralized finance, and the whole DeFi movement is focused around cryptocurrencies, like projects and services that are offering financial inclusion to a variety of people across the world. So you'll see things that are lending platforms where basically you could put up your crypto that you're hodling or holding on to, and you can put it in there and earn residual interest. You still own it, but you're basically locking it up, letting them lend it out to other individuals who could use it for various purposes. And basically after you cover the defaults and everything, the manager of a lot of these projects and stuff will take their cut and they'll send it back to you. Some do it in smart contracts, so it's completely automated, things like that. And there's also other services that help expand reach to outside of just interest and credit. being able to access investing in different financial assets, opening up financial opportunities that weren't available before. So that's really, I think, the whole philosophy is expanding, using blockchain and its benefits to expand permissionless innovation to allow opportunities for people who didn't have it before.
What does that mean for the average person? You decentralized finance. Does that mean that I have, let's just say I have 1 Bitcoin. I can use that Bitcoin for lending practices and for people that take out like mortgages on their house. They're taking mortgages off of my Bitcoin that I'm lending.
Yeah. So I can explain it pretty good. So there's a few different innovations that are going on right now. I'll give it one example that's very close to what you said. So what most people need right now, one of the big issues in cryptocurrencies is that crypto is very volatile. So we need a stable form of value. And that's where a lot of these stable coins have come in that are matching to the US dollar or some kind of financial asset.
Or trying to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sometimes they're struggling a little bit. But MakerDAO's DAI, for example, DAI it's a really cool stablecoin that tries to peg itself to the dollar. And it's something that's basically known as crypto collateralized. So collateral is basically what's backing up the creation of this new stablecoin. So in order to create DAI, you have to take your digital asset, in this case it's Ethereum, and you have to lock it into a smart contract. So it's this autonomous thing. It's not going to move your money. Basically, you can send it to this address and it will send back DAI back to your address in this case. And these DAI will be able to be used for loans across the world. So you can basically lend out, let's say I put up $200,000 worth of Ethereum into a smart contract. I'll get maybe let's say the ratios, I need basically double the collateral. I get $100,000 of DAI and I could lend that out to any of you for any purpose. And I can earn interest from that. You could pay me back 7% on top of that loan I gave you. So I'd make $7,000 if the loan went well. And that's the cool thing. We're doing it on a blockchain. So you're having the stability of the dollar and all its benefits and its value storage, but you also get the permissionless nature of a blockchain. So the Venezuelan government, let's say you're in Venezuela and I wanted to give you that same $100,000 loan for small business, the Venezuelan government can't stop us. That's the really powerful thing. And now it's permissionless finance. And you also have it where anyone can enter, so you're going to get the best deal possible as a borrower. Not to mention on the lending side, if I'm a money manager in the middle, I'm like a bank, for example, and I want to earn money off giving money out to borrowers, I'm going to have to compete for you to give me your capital. I'm going to have to offer you as a lender a better rate. So right now in the US, you get like 0.08% interest in a savings account. Banks are making 20, 30% on a quarterly basis. Who do you think deserves some of that money?
I 100% agree with that. Through my research, because I was talking just about this the other day, it was, what the banks in the United States made $235 billion in profit in 2018. And that's profit. That's after the jets and the bonuses and the payouts and the salaries and the dinners and the lobsters or whatever they're doing with their money. That's after everything. And if you take that to all the people in the United States, every individual is like $700 or something like that. And that's not even including the $1.2 trillion globally in profit from banks. And it'll be great. But, one of the things about banks and loans and things like that is like, if you take a loan and somebody's giving you a loan, you understand like, okay, they give you money, but they also have a hold on your house. So it's asset backed, that loan. What is making sure that this person's going to pay back?
Yes. So that's a good question. It's something that I think has still been yet to be completely resolved in crypto. The nice thing is that most people, they've done studies on lending. Most people will not try to undercut or like be bad on their loan. Like most of those people already default if they do in traditional markets.
But then you take their house.
Yes. Now that there's the punishment there. So the thing that I see is when we're starting to get into STOs and digitizing assets, I think that's going to be the solution. So a way that I see it, this is not the official way that it's being done, but I've talked to people who are working in digitizing assets and they said you could completely do this. You can create NFTs or non-fungible tokens, basically that resemble a specific asset. Now we've been using that for digital assets, but you can use it for real world assets. And I came up with a way to do it. You basically, when you would generate an NFT, one of these tokens on the Ethereum blockchain, what you would do is under the name, let's say maybe I've got a BMW outside or something, or like some kind of cool car or something.
And you put it under the VIN number.
Yeah, exactly. Put in the VIN number, describe it as a BMW, and say that I own it, for example. The only way that token has validity is if there's regulatory agencies. And it's the same thing in the traditional lending space. If I go bad on a loan, you're going to be able to only reclaim my home in a mortgage, like if I default, if the regulatory agencies give the authority for you to say, okay, now you own it because I didn't pay it. It'd be the same here with the token where basically we need the signatures, basically almost a private key signing of all these individual NFTs. Once it's verified, you basically have 3 or 5 major regulatory signatures. And if I, for example, in a smart contract, if I don't input the money I need to pay back on my loan, you would be given this NFT, this collateral for my car. And you could go to the regulators and say, hey, he didn't pay me back on my loan. I have this token to show you it's in my address. I can move this around. I can prove it to you. It's mine.
Right.
It's in my wallet. And they'd be like, okay, now you're the legal owner of this. And if Nick doesn't bring it to you, he's going to jail tomorrow. It's like, so that's a very simple way you could do it, I think.
So there's a couple of things that make me wonder about this. First, I see that you guys are making the back end for the the lending aspect of it.
Right.
Who's doing the tokenizing of the asset-backed NFTs for the property or whatever you're using that stuff for? Because it's very easy. You use a credit card, you issue credit, whatever. Maybe they have bad debt. I mean, I know there are people doing debt on the blockchain.
Yeah.
There's NFT. You can put, like we said, VIN numbers on an NFT token or what have you. Who's doing that other side of it? And the other aspect of it is when you're talking about collateralizing your Bitcoin or what have you, how do you make sure that the lenders don't default? Because you have to have X amount of Bitcoin collateralized toward the market. And if the market's not too stable, you have to have so much collateral in for those loans going out. How do you not default on the lenders instead of
when that DAI is created, for example, as we mentioned earlier,
right?
The stable coins. It's a good question.
Okay, so it's like, for example, if you loan out 100,000 in DAI, you have to have, let's just say, 200,000 in ETH in there to make sure
it goes down to 50%.
And then now they default on that lend. And so that person already has the money. They already bought the house. Now what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So the first one you were mentioning in this case, who's doing that kind of tokenized thing? We're not really doing that so much at Project Genesis. I would love, if regulators were ready to sit down, I would propose that idea. I think it's one of the most simple, streamlined, you could do it right now kind of applications for basically being able to build collateral for this new lending space. But outside of that, we'll have to see who does that and what the regulators choose. For the second point in that case, the stablecoin projects themselves, I think, are going to really be fixing that issue, because what we're seeing MakerDAO do right now, which is basically the creator of DAI, one of obviously the biggest companies here, it's Consensus. They're doing very similar to something that's a little less talked about, which is another stablecoin called Reserve. And they're a really fascinating team. They've been around for a long time, been very kind of in the dark, and people haven't talked about them a lot. But Reserve is doing, they're basically a multi-collateralized like debt position in this case. Basically, you have all kinds of different assets that are collateralizing it. So it's not just ETH, which is a very volatile digital store of value.
Right.
I think what they're looking to do is collateralize it with a variety of tokens. So tokens that are pegged to gold, tokens that are pegged to a variety of different assets. So basically, it's made up of a variety of different things, some of which are much more stable. So if ETH goes down 50%, it wouldn't just liquidate the entire contract.
Right. Is Reserve Huobi?
Yeah, so Huobi, I had no idea they were doing this as much as I followed the project. They just IEO'd on Huobi. I think it was their reserve shares. So there's two coins that they have. They have these shares, and then they actually have the stable coin, which is like the reserve US dollar 1-to-1 ratio. So yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen. I'm not exactly sure where they're going with it, but we'll have to see. I was interested to hear they had an IEO on it.
Right. That's super interesting, because actually that's one thing that I've been really looking at and passionate about these past couple of days is the lending, because I do believe that the banking system, we can talk about fractional reserve banking. We could talk about all these different practices that they do. I think the biggest thing is that it's your money. It's your money, and they are making money off of your money for the only benefit that the person's getting these days is the security to keep it in the bank.
Yes.
And that's the only thing that they get.
And the real security actually comes from the insurance they pay for, the FDIC.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll try to explain this the best way I can, because the only people I've heard mention this in crypto, and I'm so shocked by it, it's exactly what you're mentioning right now, that we don't realize how much of a scam the financial system is.
Right.
And I can lay it out very simply. So we kind of alluded to it earlier. So a saver in a bank, when you put your money in a savings account, you are giving that money to the bank. It is the bank's money.
Right.
If you don't have to look further than Cyprus that had a bail-in. Basically, when they went bad on their loans, they actually got to take savers or stakeholders' money and put it towards their bad mistakes.
Right.
That can happen anywhere. So we have to see that. That's already one big security risk. But the thing is, when you're giving the bank your money in a savings account, this is basically giving them the opportunity to lend it out in earned interest. So that savings rate you get, the 0.08% interest, is what a bank's paying you to keep your money in there. Why do they pay you? Well, it's because
they're lending it out and making money off of it.
You're making money off of it.
Yeah, it's like, here, we're making money, here, let's make you a little money.
But
absolutely.
This isn't 8% interest. This is 8/100ths of a percentage point.
0.008. I heard 0.009% on the average savings account in the United States. Yeah. And basically, that means you're spending money to keep it there.
Exactly. You're not even keeping up with inflation. Like it's a terrible deal for the average person. So what you have basically on the other end as well, the other bad end of the deal is if you're trying to borrow money, like let's say short-term credit on a credit card, you're paying 15%, 20%, 25%, even more than that in some cases, 30, 40%
right.
APR. And it's ridiculous. And no one should be having to pay that, even if you're a more high-risk client.
Right.
So who's making that big gap between the saver's earnings, in this case, from the interest, and what the bank is charging? The bank's making it. They're making 20, 30% a year.
Absolutely.
And they're not, here's the funny thing about it. This is just like, it's something that people don't think about, but it's so true. What does a bank produce? Like a manufacturing plant produces a product. A worker for a company produces a service. A bank doesn't produce jack all. It doesn't produce anything. It just circulates money. Now, that's a very important service.
It is an important service. So I was going to say that it will say it's not producing a physical object, which I think it's very easy to bait people into say, oh, but they don't produce something,
Yes.
and so therefore it's not important. And I think that's a bait. But they do have a very important service. And then when we talk about banking the unbanked, like in Africa or whatever, it's not just that they can transact with each other, maybe across borders or longer distances because of maybe limited travel, but it's getting that loan to get the technology, to get the equipment, to make the farm better, to grow their business,
Yes.
to hire employees and things like that. And that's the service that banks provide, which is a good service.
It is.
But can we do it with our own
And
Bitcoin?
that's that's the point there. So yeah, I guess actually taking back on a point there, yes, they don't produce anything, but they also do in a sense provide some very essential services. The problem is that they're too consolidated at this point, and due to the regulatory framework and the fact that the technological landscape right now doesn't offer for a permissionless way to interact in finance. Not to mention, these banks aren't touching unbanked economies. That's the problem. Honestly, they haven't gone through the process of building the credit measuring systems to understand how to read credit in these economies, where you're working with a little bit less data, things of that sort. They just don't feel it's worth their risk profile, and that's the very sad thing.
I totally hijacked this whole interview.
I like it. I like it. I had to go to the bathroom, so I like it.
Listeners, he actually did. He got up. He's like, I'm out.
I'm out. We're talking about banks and stuff. I'm out. I'm triggered. No, man, I 100% agree. And I think we all have been in Asia for a very long time. I don't know if you know, but Matthew was living in Taiwan for a long time, in China. And we always hang out in Asia and all these different places. And this is a huge problem, specifically in the U.S. as well. But we're going even into the topic of the people that are unbanked. That's
a bigger problem for them, man. Yeah, the thing is, I do see people always try to market for blockchain projects here in the West. They spend so much on marketing here in the U.S. And it's cool. I want to see this adopted here, but it's not built for here.
No.
We have all these conveniences and these services, and I would love to see that same thing we talked about, the interest gap that should be going back to the actual stakeholders, the savers in a bank. But this is really needed in developing economies.
Yeah, man. I was talking with a company over there that had a perfect solution for places like Vietnam and things like that. I was like, so you guys going into Asia, And they're like, oh, well, now we're focused on Europe and the U.S. right now.
And that's just fear. That is just straight up fear.
I think it's fear. I think it's ignorance too. I just don't. I
don't
think they understand. And I even question whether we're at that place yet, where people in those developing nations and those developing countries have either the technological resources, or B, whether we have built the right educational platforms for these people to understand that they even need those things.
I'll tell you the one way that I would, if I were to have one of these lending companies right now in the crypto space, like if I was the head of Celsius or one of these really cool projects, I would have billboards running through every major city in Asia saying, hey, you can get access to capital for 8%, and you can get access to the US dollar. And you can get it right now. Come to this website or come to this building, whatever. If you had to do it in physical, if they were more technically.
And you do that, you'd be walking around with Justin Sun security too, because they're coming after you, brother.
Yeah, no, the banks don't like it. Yeah, but that's the thing. And that's valuable marketing. And it's if someone saw that, they'd be like, "Where do I sign up?" Because the rates they get there are ridiculous. They're predatory in a lot of ways because they have no other options. It's the same as it is in the Western world in the U.S. The banks have a stranglehold, and they all play by the similar game. They have a general monopoly on their industry. In that case, it's very difficult from regulation standards as well as technical, and just, you're working against giants in this space on an industry that really isn't innovating. You need to really innovate to stand out.
Michael, you were telling me a company the other day that was working in South America or whatever, and people in South America, and I don't know, I can't remember the company's name, but that you heard because you did a whole thing on Venezuela.
Yeah.
And you said that the companies that are even in crypto that say they're doing stuff in crypto and helping out these countries down there that might have hyperinflation or what have you, are maybe a little scammy and not doing what they say they're doing.
I mean, I can't confirm the data, so I'm not going to name the company or anything like that, but that's what some people have informed me of, and I don't know whether it's true or not, and I'm sure there are instances where it is true and there are instances where it isn't true, but yeah, I mean, I think that's also a big, big issue is we have so much money flowing in this industry right now, and especially end of 2017, beginning of 2018, and probably over the next 2-3 years, I'm almost convinced that we will have a lot more flowing in. It plays upon multiple psychological factors, including greed, and I think greed's like the biggest issue because I think greed is the problem where we get the emotion, it's the trigger, it's whatever you want to call it, that separates the rational decision making of saying, oh, this needs to be used to build this technology to help A, B, and C, and it moves that thought process over to how can I help myself, which I think we saw a lot of. I think a great example is last year's consensus is so different than this year's consensus.
Yeah.
Like last year.
How was it, man? Because I wasn't here, man. You guys want to break that down for me?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to run and then I want to hear your experience of it. Like last year was way more people. I saw a really good tweet today. I can't remember who sent it. It was the CEO of Lisk. I don't remember his name.
Max Cordex.
Yeah, he sent a tweet. He's like, last year, everyone introduced themselves as an investor. This year, everyone was building things.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I was like, that's actually really fucking true. Like last year, everyone was an investor. There were Lambos parked out front of the Hilton all day, every day. People pulling up, like rented Lambos, purchased Lambos. There was a point where there was like 5 or 6 just parked on the street out there. And while it was fun and while it was exciting and it kind of got the juices flowing and like everybody was like kind of high on adrenaline and stuff, this year it's maybe half as many people, but everyone's serious. Like everyone's actually here building stuff or has been building stuff and has survived the bear market. And even when I say there's half amount of people, like there's still too many people to even like consider talking to a quarter of them.
Oh yeah.
Like it's crazy. What was your experience?
So like I said, I didn't get to go last year, but I will say I can completely attest to the latter of what you were saying, basically what this year was like. It seemed comparative to other conferences I've been to. I had that same experience when I went to my first one in February 2018 in Singapore.
Yeah.
It was the Blockchain Economic Forum. Everyone came up to me. It was like, oh yeah, we're doing an ICO. We're an investor. Here, everyone's like, hey man, we've been working at this all throughout the bear market. How can we work together? And it was really cool to see people realize like, oh wait, this is an open source ecosystem. Like we benefit from collaboration. Like our code is public. Like anyone can take it. Like it's not a competition of companies and tokens any longer. Like I think there's been a consolidation of like real players in the crypto space, and it's about building infrastructure around those players. And that's the cool thing. I like that about the DeFi movement. That's what I see a lot. But also just in general, people are like, look, how can we work together? And I think everyone has that relation because they were there during that run up, and they're still here during the bear market. So
you know what I just realized when you said that? I don't think I got one person pitching me an ICO or an IEO.
No one came up to me. No one came up to me during this whole conference. How amazing is that, dude? Compared it to my first one in February.
That blows my mind.
I had 80 people give me their business cards trying to say like, look, do you do marketing on your channel and this and that? I had maybe like 1 or 2 people who did that here, and they were just kind of like, is there a way I can get to contact with you, tell you about what we're doing with our project? Like, yeah. It was really impressive, dude.
I had a decent.
I did have 1 and 2.
Yeah.
1 or 2, yeah.
I had people asking me for help with marketing, but all of them had products that they had built that were structured. None of them were like, hey, we need to raise funds. Will you like show us, or will you like do this so we can make like more money on the IEO?
I've been asking you about money a whole week, bro.
Yeah, that Crypto 101 ICO. Here we go.
What's the pre-sale like?
yeah, get me in on that pre-sale, bro.
And it's just pre-mined, man. I own 90%. Raising 50 million.
Yeah. Oh, that's easy, man.
50 million, bro. Let's bump it to 70.
What's the hard cap? Yeah, I just want to see the soft cap. Yeah. No, it's so funny because I'm so happy to see that that's kind of that. I mean, there's IEOs obviously and stuff, but like on my channel, we were talking about monetizing and stuff. We do ads and stuff, but we don't do IEOs or ICOs or anything like that personally. And I'm just happy to see, even though there is this kind of new wave of IEOs, and who knows, maybe it might prove to be a little bit different. I'm happy to see that there's more people trying to focus on the infrastructure and building out things that'll get us moving crypto in general towards a wider audience.
What do you think of the IEOs?
Actually, can you do an IEO 101? Because I'm actually pretty dumb about this.
Yeah. So yeah, IEOs basically, it's kind of
I'm
funny.
gonna take that back. I don't want to say I'm pretty dumb because a lot of people probably are asking the same thing. What is an IEO?
Yeah, no, it's not a thing to feel stupid over if you don't know it. It's because it's relatively new. I kind of found out about it a little bit later than most people. Basically, an IEO is where you do a token launch directly on an exchange. So, whereas ICOs, for example, raised capital, they raised Ethereum usually, they would basically beg for exchanges to list them. In fact, they'd pay them a lot of money. And that wasn't a very effective model because you do need liquidity for a token. So they were like, hey, why can't we just launch these directly off the exchanges? And, there's still the debate of whether or not it's security and stuff like that for a lot of these, but it's like, crap, if we're going to list these, why don't we just start off right on our platform? And what they've actually done is they've done two cool things. One thing, and the kind of selfish aspect of these exchanges, it's smart in a sense, is that they realized ETH as a currency got a lot of its value last year, not from being the world's supercomputer like it tried to be. It was a liquidity gate, basically an entry for money to invest and speculate on these ICOs. So they're like, why can't we do that with our token?
Right.
And that's exactly what Binance is doing with BNB.
Right.
KuCoin's doing with their KuCoin shares.
Right.
Huobi token, etc.
Right.
And that now on the one benefit side is that it does allow a lot more retail participants to get in at the entry for these tokens in a sense, that's one nice thing that's come out of this. How is it really different from ICOs? Not that different. It's the same. We don't really have much of a product right now. We don't have really good revenue, but we've got this idea and it could be the next big thing. So
I think that the way that it's different from ICOs is that I think that when you're just using ETH, it maybe inflated ETH to be unreasonable, and everything in ETH's price was unreasonable based off these companies that needed this for liquid cash to run their business. Now you have it more distributed through BNB and these other IEO platforms, whatever that's doing it. So it's probably, I would say, maybe a little more stable.
I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing.
It would just be distributed. So like the reason why ETH raised, so it's kind of funny. There was a big dilemma with the ICO model, and it was that people would raise, for example, let's say I wanted to raise like 10 million ETH for $10 million worth of Ethereum, and Ethereum's valued at $10 at the time, so I need 1 million Ethereum. Ethereum goes up to say $30, and now the 10 million that I've raised is now 30 million. I'm rich. I'm just sitting here. Now we have 3 times the capital to work with. Let's just keep holding that ETH. Goes up to $50, goes up to 80, a few hundreds, thousands. So people are sitting on some major cash. I'm like, man, we only asked for 10 million, and now we've got hundreds of millions, and they didn't sell it. And they saw that as a benefit that ETH it was like this capital you raised that kept on giving. But then ICO slowed down.
Right.
The capital dried up. The entry of new liquidity to ETH stopped, and they started selling.
Right.
Yeah, ETH goes to
Smart
$80.
money started getting out. And these ICOs that were at the top who raised at the price of $1,000, they're like, oh, okay, now it's down to $500. Okay, now we have half the capital. Don't worry, we got a lot. Okay, so that's down to $200.
And not only that, they're thinking like it hits 500. They're like, okay, it's okay. We'll wait. We'll wait till it
rebounds.
It's gonna bounce. It's gonna go back up. We'll wait.
And then when their project really needs that money to build out what they promised they were going to build, they don't have it. And it was a big problem. And I think the IEOs, it'll be the same way if people they're raising in the capital, because that's how these IEOs raise. You have to buy the exchange token.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like,
so that's why I say if it's distributed, like it probably won't have that same problem, because unless maybe everybody flocks to the BNB token. But I mean, there are IEOs on different platforms. Everybody's trying to get a little piece of that pie.
Yeah.
So
it's on a smaller scale.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So BNB, basically what Binance would have to do is they have to keep that hype train going.
Right.
They have to keep newer and bigger IEOs coming through, which and maybe they'll be able to do, but it's like,
and at this point there's only really one at a time.
Yeah,
there's like one happens 2 weeks, they take another week or two or maybe even a month off, and it's not like with Ethereum where there's literally 30 ICOs going on all at the same time. and the interesting thing is, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, like the IEO model is not new, it's just popularized right now. Like the first IEO that I'm aware of was literally back in January, I want to say January or February, maybe March of 2018. So BRD, Bread Wallet, they had done
the Binance Launchpad, right?
Yeah, they did an ICO for half of their funds, and then they went on the Binance Launchpad for the other half of their funds. And that technically was the very first IEO that I'm aware of, at least. And I think this is where the model like became popularized, but it was literally like beginning of 2018-ish, maybe even earlier, that they were doing this model, and it was very successful. Like I remember specifically, it sold out in a few minutes, got listed right on Binance, started at 3x like the price, like very similar to what we're seeing now. Maybe not as high inflated model, but yeah. And I think that's what people don't realize. I think people are like, oh, well, this is just like, Binance was probably planning this for a while. They've been working on this.
I think they might have captured that success, and then the
I
other
think-
exchanges just followed right after.
I think they saw that. I think they saw the success that BRD had. They saw the success that this model could have. And then they just didn't do it at all for like 6 to 8 months. And they were probably planning and strategizing this whole thing for that long.
I don't disagree, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they're smart. We know they're smart.
Very smart.
And they're planned, they're organized, and they're patient.
Yeah.
And so I don't disagree.
What do you think about this hack with Binance?
Man, I'm real interested. It's weird to me. I wish they would have a little bit more. I would love it because they do so many great videos, and like they are pretty transparent comparative to a lot of crypto exchanges.
Yeah.
That's not saying too much because it's crypto, but I'll tell you, I would love to see with the it seems as if there was a problem on their backend systems with the like identity verification. People were able to claim they were someone they were not, and I'm curious why those addresses. Why did it stop at those? Why at that kind of rough range of $40 million? And then also, can they explain just what was wrong in their systems and how they're aiming to improve it? I'm glad to see that it seems everything's fine. They have the Seifu Fund. Big props to that. I thought it was so funny at the time they did it, but I was like, I admire that they've taken some of the boatload of money they're making and at least put it up to cover these funds. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to see, with the movement of Tether and everything.
Was it the Safer Fund, or was it Justin Sun that paid the money?
No, just
Who knows,
I think
man.
Justin said something like he's like,
Justin Sun wanted to buy his own token with the money.
Yeah,
He's
that's
like,
the
I'll
thing,
put
yeah,
it on
they-
Binance and I'll buy TRX
buy-
or BitTorrent. I was like,
yeah,
all right, bro.
It's like that's
congratulations.
not giving people money like, unless they own the TRX, but it might have gotten hacked. But yeah, it was just a straight Bitcoin hack. But I don't know, it's weird.
Actually, it was probably more like Justin Sun was like, hey, $41 million just showed up in my account. I don't know what happened. Let me help you out a little bit.
Yeah, man. I honestly I admire like Binance has done a lot of things right. I think people are very one-sided on the company as they are with most controversial any player in the crypto space. People have strong opinions on, but I would love to see some serious solutions to custody, and not to mention as well in this whole effort of DeFi's. When you're talking about this is our money. Us actually having a very easy way to manage our own money and not feeling overwhelmed by management of private keys and things like that. I want to see us eventually get to the tech solution that will make it simpler to become our own bank in that case, so we don't have to worry. And then when we need exchange services, moving our money to a third party who can be a broker, or just being able to do it peer-to-peer, that would be really cool.
Man, one of the biggest conversations I'm hearing in the space when it comes to price was, I'm just moving away from everything right now, totally taking a turn at the corner here, is Tether was a big contributor to pumping Bitcoin price. A lot of ransomware was a big contributor to pumping Bitcoin price. The ICO craze was a big contributor to pumping the crypto price, altcoins, shitcoins, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. With all of that gone, are we going to see $20,000 Bitcoin again? I mean, let's just say they say fuck.
I think
they say don't buy Tether. They say buy, ICO no more. Whatever. All this is gone. What do you think?
I think this is like the first time we're gonna see it correctly, because we're backed by fundamentals. Yeah. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, building on what Michael said, it's not going to happen as fast. This will be an uptrend that I believe goes past 20,000. I don't know if we're on it right yet. I think we have to still have that sharp correction we talked about after this run up to 8K. But after that, we can start to build the base that we get back to the previous highs, which will take a good few months. And once we reach that point, that's when Bitcoin really starts to move parabolic like it did back in 2017. After it got through 2016, got past the previous highs, built a base there, and ran up.
I hate when anybody talks about Bitcoin price because I automatically get that FOMO feeling no matter what. And I'm just like,
did I buy enough?
Did I buy?
Yeah. How much time do I have?
No, how much money do I have?
Yeah.
Are we dipping? Are we gonna hit? Yeah. Are we gonna hit 5K? Should I buy now?
Yeah. I've been honestly like I'd like to own like a few Bitcoin and just like hold it long term and stuff. I really don't care too much about money, but I want to have a stake in this next financial revolution. I think as anyone does, and with the limited supply, I mean, it becomes very clear and stuff like, you've got a few years. We're very fortunate. We're still very early on. And to that point of your original question, stuff like will it ever go past 20,000? Abundantly, yes. The reason why I believe that, even if Bitcoin didn't last past 10 years from now, the reason why is
calm down, Michael. Calm down.
I'm excited.
But the reason why I'm confident in it is because I understand just how important a censorship-resistant digital global store of value is for the world. A finite supply of store of value at 21 million coins, and with seeing how DeFi is almost like using Bitcoin and Ethereum as the store of value while we still use stable coins and kind of reduce that volatility in our transactions, but still use crypto. We can have some really interesting scenarios. So I mentioned earlier about that idea about, like, let's say you were a Venezuelan citizen and I lent you 10,000 DAI. I'm now giving you access to credit in the US dollar, and we don't have to ask anyone for it.
Right.
We don't have to wait for the regulators. And it's really, really fascinating, especially if you can do it in a private manner. So that adds more safety to the user.
Somebody asked me this the other day, and I did not know the question or the answer to this. And I'm going to ask you guys, has there ever been a deflationary currency in the history of the world?
I'm trying to go back on it. I don't know of any specific like deflationary ones. The vast majority of are inflationary, and you can.
I mean, it's almost a natural thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we need more money. Let's make more money.
Yeah,
It's
you
like,
could even start out with the idea of doing a deflationary currency, but if there's a central bank or money managers who could change that or have the printing press, yeah, it could change on a dime.
I mean, is there even an example of a way to do it besides Bitcoin? Is there any way to do it at this point?
So in the sense, so Bitcoin, one thing that
Besides cryptography, besides setting the
Yeah.
limit, and just it can't be changed, even though it could have been changed, but they fixed that. But anyway,
I think Bitcoin is one of the better ways because the people who can make changes to the network and its monetary policy are the miners, and the miners do not want to inflate the supply.
Obviously.
I would say, especially the longer term ones, especially the large holders in Bitcoin and everything who have a large stake in mining, they have that authority over the network on BIPs, like Bitcoin proposals. I don't think you'll ever see that. And that's the cool thing. That's why people have trust in Bitcoin that it won't change. And its user base doesn't want it as well. They'll flee if Bitcoin goes to 42 million coins instead of 21 million. Yeah.
Did you ever see that show with? I was just trying to think of different deflationary currencies. You ever see that show with Justin Timberlake, and he was getting the time, and you have to give people time to live, and that was used as currency to buy things.
I've seen that.
Wouldn't that be a deflationary currency? Because time is limited.
It is limited. That's true. Well, it will.
Boom. Mind blow, bro.
Boom. Where can I buy time coin? I'm on Google. How to invest in time coin?
But did you see that movie?
I had heard about it. No, I haven't seen it personally.
It was actually pretty good. Yeah, and they'll run around and say, "Oh, how much would this cost?" It would cost you, 3 hours, and or I want to buy a sandwich. It cost me 5 minutes.
That's pretty neat.
And the clock on their arm ran down to their death. So you had to buy time, and rich people had a shit ton of time.
Yeah, exactly. That's wild. It's interesting that, just kind of speaking on the importance of money here. One thing I always summarize is that, we spend our 9 to 5s on money. Like a lot of people ask me, because I originally was a macro trader. My specialty was trading market cycles and finding that like next big technology before I traded, and hopefully making a return, but also just I found a fascination in it. But the thing about it is there's no technology in the 21st century that's going to impact this world more than crypto. And the reason I know that is because we work our 9 to 5s for money. Money moves the world. Money can buy you anything in the world, can buy you power, anything you want. And if we can build better money that not only is just better money in general, but works for its users, the everyday people, you will see such an improvement in the standard of living in this world. You'll uplift people and economies who have been left behind, who have been moving at a slow pace because of archaic systems that haven't worked for them. And you'll also see, even here in Western economies, you're going to see people have a much higher standard of living. So I'm excited for it. And that's going to allow for so many more other technologies to get investment and to expand at a faster pace.
Do you believe in aliens?
Oh, jeez, I'm done.
Oh man, I almost asked someone else that earlier today. I was gonna ask Lops that.
Oh really?
Yeah, I was like, I should ask him if he believes in aliens. I don't know why.
What's funny is we got off the interview and he was just like, Jameson Lop makes me nervous, and because he's just knows so much. And I always said like I'm always a little intimidated talking to him too. Imagine if he asked that.
Yeah, I just don't want to say something dumb, man. Like he knows a lot, and he's like, and I just like I know I'm still learning, but I really just don't want to say something dumb where he's just like, what? Come on, man, you don't know that,
You gotta go to and be like, hey, if you believe in it, like I'll believe in it. But no, I could go down to so many different rabbit holes talking about all kinds of different topics and stuff. Like crypto is like my favorite topic.
But aliens isn't?
I don't know enough on the topic of aliens, but
so you don't know enough on the topic, so you don't believe in aliens. Is that what we're saying?
I'll be undecided for now, but I will say there's a pretty good chance that I know there's actually some scientific. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it basically talks about like the probability of aliens, like on different levels of civilization, and like if there is intelligent life out there, either if we haven't seen them, that's really scary. That means that we're like the top end of
the zoo theory.
yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, there's
that's just crazy.
yeah, there's a lot of deep theories. I think Kirk's cast, like an educational YouTube channel, did a good video explaining it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in the topic of it.
How do you define alien? Is this like, are you talking about like other extraterrestrial life that is definitely more intelligent than we are, or just like any life out in the universe?
Technically, any life out there in the universe, microbial, whatever, but I'm talking about intelligent life that, is in spaceships flying around or whatever.
Man, I think there's definitely something.
Dude, I think they're here.
I mean,
I think they've been here. They have been here. I've seen them.
I mean, I'm gonna go a little
The
like,
reptilians. I'm
I'm gonna go a little like out there a little bit, but I think it's like in a dimension that like is probably operating like at simultaneously at the dimension that we're operating in, but we are just not able to experience that dimension.
I'll tell you, man, the one thing that's really fascinated me, I studied this stuff years ago back in like the early 2010s when I was actually really eager about the whole cannabis legalization in the United States. I was really interested in the whole like look into psychedelics and stuff.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's like recounted, obviously Joe Rogan's been talking about it, so everyone's buzzing about it. But like,
Right.
I'd studied like on obviously like psilocybin mushrooms and DMT, and I'd studied this stuff, and to me it seemed so far out. I was like, dude, look, I know how people overhyped weed when I was growing up. I was like, it's probably the same stuff times 3. The one thing I always recommend people look into is DMT or dimethyltryptamine. And just the similarity in stories and the recurrence of not only meeting certain entities that are very similar in nature and communicating with them, but also just how real it seems to people. They're like, no, that wasn't a dream. That was something that was unworldly.
Yeah.
And I never thought or composed an idea similar to that.
Do you know anything about DMT, man?
I have much experience.
Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, you might be the good guy to talk to about it.
This is like, I know more about this than I know about crypto. So
But I don't know how long we want to go, but I want to know about your experiences, bro.
it's nothing that can ever be described, but that like you hear it in interviews, you like listen to it, and then like this is exactly what got me inspired. Like, around the same time frame, like 2009, 2010, like leading into like 2012, where like the whole like Mayan prophecy of the world ending, and everybody was freaking out because the Mayan calendar.
Oh, yeah.
If you were in any like subsector that had like looked into like even like small beliefs in aliens, like people believed in this stuff. Anyways, yeah, like I said, I think it's tapping into another dimension of reality. Like there are layers of reality, right? And we are experiencing the third layer of reality right here presently. We can touch things, we can feel things, and science proves that these things are not technically physical. They are just matter that is made up of atoms that are vibrating at different frequencies.
That kind of stick together and just do their thing.
Exactly. They stick
Right.
together. Some are more dense than others are. You know, I can touch this table and knock on this table, but then I can grab the water and I can drink the water. You know, it's more fluid. It's made of different atoms, made of different particles, made of different vibrations. And I think that like when you're in the third dimension, you're experiencing things like that. And I think there's other dimensions, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, where humans don't naturally connect with.
Yeah.
I think that you can connect with them through near-death experiences, through psychedelic experiences. I mean, technically, dimethyltryptamine, DMT, is only released through the pineal gland, the center. It's a gland that was known by the ancients as like the quote-unquote third eye. And it only releases during 3 different periods of your life: your birth, your death, and when you're in like a really deep REM cycle, as well as most likely
When you consume it, or
or when you consume it, or most likely like a near-death experience.
Near-death experience,
Exactly. So every time that I participated and went into it, I did it in a very, very constructive way where I was like very intentional with it. You know, I don't think any psychedelics or any drugs at all should be utilized in a heavy recreational standpoint. I think if you're going to do it, you do it with intention, and you're very, very, very respectful of these, what you would call medicines, because it's like a thin line. I always say there's a very thin line between the connection between the mind, the body, and the soul. There's a very thin line, and you want to respect that at all times. You don't want to mess around with that. And some people should never even touch it. Some people who may be schizophrenic or have schizophrenic tendencies or other mental issues should never touch these things. I want to make that very, very clear. But yeah, man, I think there's just different levels and different dimensions. And I think there are things that are maybe for our benefit or not for our benefit, depending on them. that operate in these different dimensions. And now we're off the topic of crypto.
But that's
Far off the
okay.
topic
Look,
of crypto, but I love it.
I've never did DMT. I have done my fair share of mushrooms and LSD. I've done extensive meditation, and I think that in each of those places, you realize that there's more in your every physical day-to-day life. Being sober or whatever, or even not. Trying to train your brain to do or process information differently during meditation, you just kind of limit yourself into box of what reality really is. And once you start expanding yourself, you go, whoa, the possibilities are endless. And when you're talking about dimensions and things like that, I personally think, and since you talked about your idea of it, I want to talk about mine real quick, is I think that all dimensions intersect with each other. And the fourth dimension is where time is fluid, right? And we three-dimensional beings only can look at time as in a linear fashion. We only look at it from the start to the end. And that's the only way we can do it. But
that's not really how it works. But that's how we perceive how it
works. That's how we perceive it. Exactly. But it's really fluid. So I think that we're talking about how we are experiencing life. We only experience it in a linear fashion. But our life is actually happening simultaneous and at many different places. I mean, some places, what happens after we die? In my personal opinion, I don't think we ever die. Because if time can be at every place at the same time, and no matter who's looking at it from a certain perspective, they're going to have to be looking at my consciousness either before my death or sometime during my life. So if you can turn time in like the fourth dimension, and time exists everywhere, and they can look at you at any point in time, you have to exist.
That's really interesting. And I think that like we're getting really into some cool deep shit, and I'm sure that we don't have a lot of time to do this, but I think time is very, very, very much like that in terms of we perceive it as linear, but really what it is it's cause and effect.
Yeah.
It's like when an action occurs, there is a reaction to what has occurred in that action. And that's actually how time works, is you are literally bouncing off all of these causes and reactions, which is why most people stay in the same process loops or the same feedback loops their entire lives, is because they're just bouncing back and forth off of same patterns or same habits that they've created. Now, some of those habits are very good. You go to the gym and you get fit and you feed your endorphins that way. That's a healthy habit to create. Now, there's also negative habits. You get the habit of taking a cigarette break every hour and you smoke a cigarette. Well, that's bad for your body, right? So people are caught in these feedback loops, which is, I think, how time works, is they go outside, they smoke a cigarette, for example, and it keeps them stuck in the same emotional, mental, spiritual thought patterns that are essentially creating their experience or what they are experiencing in reality.
So you're trying to say that every time you break your feedback loop or every time you try to adjust your linear pattern, you're actually forking time, and that's why people can create their own realities?
I don't think it's linear at all. I actually think it's circular. Imagine like there's a giant circle right here, and I'm going to try to describe this as best as I possibly can. And inside that circle is your experience of life. And you are bouncing off all these different experiences that you have chosen based upon the decisions that you've made. And when you're bouncing off those decisions, usually it's a chain reaction. So you choose to smoke a cigarette, and maybe that triggers a reaction to become emotionally angry, which triggers a reaction to treat the next person you see in a negative light, which continues to feed more and more of a negative feedback loop until you go back to have a cigarette.
Which then goes to make you go buy a beer at home, then you go home and sit down and watch TV. You watch TV, you go to bed at the same